Welcome back to the Deep Dive on F1 Blogs.
Great to be here.
We're your shortcut to really getting what's going on in Formula One. And today, well, we're diving deep into Lando Norris's 2025 season.
Yeah, it's been quite something to watch, hasn't it?
Definitely. We're going to unpack his performance, those challenges he's facing, and of course, the championship fight with his own teammate, Oscar Piastri.
Exactly. And the goal here is to pull out the key insights from some detailed analysis we've seen, so you can get the full picture fast.
Right. Because, while Lando's not miles behind in the points or anything.
No, not at all.
There had clearly been some struggles, some bumps in the road.
For sure. And recent analysis, the kind you find on F1 blogs, has really highlighted 4 key areas that seem to be contributing to where he is right now.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's dissect those 4 areas. Where do we start?
I think the first one, and it's probably the most visible, the one people talk about a lot online, Q3. That qualifying drop-off, you see the comments, don't you? Him throwing it away or, choking under pressure.
Yeah, which feels a bit harsh sometimes because he can pull out absolutely stunning laps.
Oh, absolutely. He's capable of magic in Q3. But the overall trend, the failure to consistently deliver right at that key moment, it's undeniable this season.
So what are the numbers actually telling us? Because gut feel is one thing, data's another.
Right. And when you look at all the sessions practice, Q1, Q2, Sprint Quali 1, Sprint Quali 2, the pattern is, well, it's pretty stark.
Okay.
Norris is consistently quicker than Piastri in those earlier segments, often by, let's say, just under 1/10 of a second. It's close, but he generally has that edge.
So he's got the underlying pace, finds the limit quicker maybe?
Seems like it, but then you hit Q3.
And it flips.
It flips drastically. Suddenly, Piastri finds about 1/10.5 on average. And Norris has only actually been faster than Piastri in Q3 on 4 out of 12 occasions.
Wow, only 1/3 of the time. Compared to being faster, what, 2/3 or 3/4 of the time before that?
Exactly. So something happens in that final shootout. The insight here really seems to be that his aggressive style, pushing right to the edge, it works brilliantly up to a point.
But leaves no margin for error when perfection is needed.
Precisely. That's where the vulnerability appears.
So why? What's behind this Q3 conundrum? Is it just one thing?
No, it seems to be a few things coming together. One is definitely his driving style, that specific way he likes to combine the braking and cornering phases.
Which we've seen before, right? This isn't totally new for 2025.
Not at all. It's how he extracts lap time, but it inherently makes you more vulnerable to mistakes when you're searching for those absolute thousandths. A tiny lockup, a slight misjudgment, it costs more.
And how does the car, the current McLaren, play into that? Does it help or hinder?
It seems to hinder, or at least exaggerate it. The car feels apparently quite comfortable at 99%. Easy to drive.
Which is maybe what we see in Q1, Q2?
Quite possibly, but pushing for that last 1%, that's where something seems to, trip Norris up. He's been quite open about that feeling.
They brought that revised front suspension in Montreal, didn't they, to try and help with feel?
They did, aimed at giving more feedback. But, it's probably still a bit too early to say definitively how much difference it's made. Needs more time, more tracks.
And then there's the P word, pressure.
Oh, absolutely. Huge factor. Fighting your teammate in the same car for potentially a world championship, that pressure is immense.
And Piastri seems to be handling it incredibly well.
He does. And you get the sense Norris is really feeling it, maybe not quite processing it as effectively as Oscar right now. We saw glimpses last year, too, chasing Verstappen. That pressure can lead to overdriving.
Yeah, I remember Andrea Stella's comments in Canada saying Lando was asking too much of the car. Even radio messages telling him to focus on braking.
Exactly. And Lando, to his credit, is incredibly honest about feeling nervous before qualifying. He admits it.
Which is quite rare and, laudable.
It is. And that nervous energy can fuel amazing laps. But it can also, tip over into slight misjudgments, tiny bits of imprecision when you're right on that ragged edge.
Okay, so Q3 is complex. Style, car, pressure. Let's move to the second area, the car itself. You mentioned that numbness.
Yeah, the car characteristics. There seems to be this slight numbness or lack of sharp feedback from the front axle. Drivers aren't getting that immediate, crisp cueing they want.
Like a delay in feeling what the front tires are doing?
Kind of. A slight delay in the feedback loop. So drivers have to almost preempt what the car will do rather than reacting instantly to what it is doing.
And for Norris, with his style of really leaning on that front end, overlapping, braking, and turning.
Yeah.
That's got to be tricky.
It seems particularly challenging for him, yes. His style, theoretically, is super fast if you nail it, because you're maximizing the tire's potential across both braking and cornering forces simultaneously.
But it demands absolute trust and feedback.
Exactly. You need to feel exactly what the tire is doing right on the limit. And if that feedback is just slightly delayed or muted,
You risk overstepping it.
right. Whereas Piastri, his style is maybe a bit more straightforward, less reliant on that absolute knife edge feel through that combined phase.
So he's less vulnerable to that specific characteristic of the McLaren.
It appears so.
Yeah.
He seems better able to just accept, okay, maybe this corner isn't perfect, I'll lose a tiny bit here, rather than forcing the issue and risking a bigger mistake.
Interesting. Okay, so beyond quali and the car's feel, the third area, racecraft, that's come up a fair bit too.
It has. It's been a sort of recurring question mark, really, since McLaren got consistently back to the front end late last year.
Canada was a big example, wasn't it? Driving into the back of Piastri.
Yeah, that was pretty careless, wasn't it? On a move that was, well, very, very marginal at best.
It reminded some people, I saw comparisons online, to Vettel back in 2018, that run of small to medium errors that just kept adding up.
It's a fair comparison in terms of the type of errors. These aren't massive shunts usually, but they're like micro to medium mistakes. Singapore last year, nearly losing it while leading.
Australia this year, running wide, putting himself under pressure.
China sprint. Bahrain wasn't his cleanest race. Even Miami, actually.
Oh, yeah. What happened to Miami?
Well, Stella pointed out both drivers took the same number of laps to pass Verstappen eventually, but Piastri was just much more efficient.
That was all.
Piastri sized him up, had one go, didn't quite work, then nailed it the next lap. Clean. Norris's attempts were messier, ran himself out of road, cost himself more time overall to get the job done.
So these little racecraft moments, combined with sometimes starting further back because of Q3.
Exactly. It means he has more work to do on Sunday and maybe isn't always the most efficient at getting that work done.
Is it impatience? Like in Bahrain with Russell, maybe trying to move too soon?
It can look like that sometimes. He sees a gap and he seems to want to go there immediately. Maybe doesn't always calculate the risk versus reward quite as calmly as Piastri seems to.
So Piastri maybe has the edge in racecraft right now. More calculated.
I'd say so, yeah. A little bit more calm, a bit more calculating in the heat of the moment.
Which leads us perfectly into point number 4. The Oscar Piastri factor itself. His rise has been meteoric.
It really has, and that's undeniably impacting Norris. Piastri just being faster this year creates so much less breathing room for Lando.
Less margin for error.
Way less. And way more pressure. Remember last year, Piastri was often, 2, maybe 3 tenths off.
Yeah, consistently that bit behind.
That gap's basically gone. Now it's maybe a tenth and a half max, and often Oscar's as quick or even slightly quicker on raw pace.
That's a huge step up in just one season.
Massive. And the insight here is that Piastri stepping up hasn't just raised the internal bar, it's actually started to expose some of Norris's vulnerabilities that maybe weren't obvious when he had a bigger cushion.
And Piastri's Sunday performances, like you mentioned in Miami.
Yeah, he seems to have a real edge there quite often. More efficient, clinical maybe.
Plus, winning at tracks where he was weak last year, like China, like Spain,
Yeah.
is impressive.
It really is. And winning races, like he has 5 times this year already, even when maybe he wasn't the absolute outright fastest driver that weekend.
That's a championship winner's trait, isn't it? Grinding out results.
It absolutely is. Making the most of the package, maximizing points, even on an off day. Piastri is proving to be a much, much tougher rival internally and for the title than I think anyone really expected for 2025.
Including maybe Lando himself.
Quite possibly. Piastri's just ticked every single box you'd have set for him preseason. Qualifying pace, tire management, consistency.
Yeah.
It's all there. The level is just higher.
Okay. This brings us nicely to some questions we've had from you, the listeners, via F1 blogs. Let's tackle a few. First one from Jack Goodall. He asks, is it early, but are we watching Lando fumble the title here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Look, the short answer is no. It's definitely too early to say he's fumbled it.
But he's maybe fumbled the first part.
You could say that, yeah. He's certainly made it harder for himself than it needed to be, perhaps. But there's such a long way to go. It's really easy to just extrapolate, isn't it? To say, well, this happened, so it'll keep happening.
But F1 rarely works like that.
Exactly. Things change. Drivers adapt. Teams improve things.
So yeah, he's behind on points, wins, poles right now. But the gap isn't insurmountable. If he won the next few races,
he could genuinely lead the championship going into the summer break. It's absolutely still there for him to win.
if he can address, say, half the things we've just talked about.
That might be enough to swing the momentum properly back his way. It's that close.
Okay, next question from Peter Gillum. Is the mental battle at McLaren already fought and won by Piastri?
Again, I'd say no, not one. Piastri definitely has the momentum right now. He's riding a wave. But Norris still possesses that tiny underlying pace advantage, maybe just hundredths, but it's there.
And that must give him confidence, knowing he can be faster.
Absolutely. And while Piastri is incredibly cool, mentally very strong, he's still, let's not forget, relatively inexperienced in F1 terms. Remember Hungary last year? He can still have wobbles.
So if Norris tidies up his weekend,
then the pressure swings right back onto Piastri. Suddenly it becomes his championship to lose. The dynamic could shift very quickly.
Okay, related to racecraft. Amoros Rock asks if Norris can truly go wheel-to-wheel, focusing on bravery versus racecraft. And David Sally wonders if Lando has an impatience issue.
Bravery is definitely not the issue. Lando Norris is not scared of putting the car there, making a move. We see that all the time.
Yeah, he'll go for a gap.
Absolutely. But it's the patience and the calculation within that racecraft where Piastri currently seems to have the edge. Thinking back to Bahrain with Russell, maybe waiting a lap would have been smarter.
And Canada speaks for itself on judgment, maybe.
Right. Piastri just seems that little bit calmer, more measured in those wheel-to-wheel moments right now.
Swanomad asks if Lando's the most honest person in F1. He is remarkably open.
He really is, isn't he? Sometimes you think maybe too open for his own good. But that's just him. It's how he processes things.
But it's not a lack of self-belief.
No, not at all. Underneath that honesty, you always hear the conviction. Listen closely. He'll say something like, yeah, I messed up, but I was quicker than him. I should have won if I hadn't let myself down.
Right. That underlying belief in his own speed is still there.
Absolutely. It's a combination of radical honesty and unwavering self-belief, which is quite a unique mix.
Okay, Zephyr asks, is Norris now de facto the number 2 driver at McLaren, at least for this season?
No, absolutely not. McLaren historically just doesn't operate like that. They hate labels. Remember last year? Piastri was miles behind on points sometimes, but they let them race.
They didn't impose orders.
Exactly. And Norris still has that tiny pace edge we talked about, that hundredth or two. That gives him leverage, gives him confidence. He knows deep down the raw speed is there. So no, Piastri can't claim superiority, and Lando won't just roll over.
Right. And a big hypothetical from OA. Could Norris leave McLaren if Piastri wins the title this year? Maybe go to Aston Martin. Suggesting the pressure is getting to him.
Well, it's highly unlikely in the short term. Both are on long contracts. It would need a pretty spectacular falling out, I think.
Yeah, contracts are pretty tight these days.
Very. Now, long term, history does show that in these top driver pairings, one often eventually asserts themselves, makes the team theirs. And if Piastri did win the title this year, that would be a huge step in that direction.
Which could eventually make the other driver look elsewhere.
It could, theoretically, but both drivers right now constantly talk about their ambition being at McLaren long term. So while performance changes everything eventually, we are miles away from that scenario right now.
Okay, Nir Yagev asks, is it now safe to say Norris makes too many mistakes to become a world champion? Tough question.
It is tough. And based on what we've discussed, you'd have to say, no, it's not safe to say that yet. But
if the current trend continues,
then yes, it will stop him. You can't consistently make these kinds of errors in qualifying and races and expect to win a title against someone as relentless as Piastri is proving to be. He can win it, absolutely, but he needs to clean up these areas.
He's capable, but the execution needs to be better.
Exactly. He's not the favorite right now, based on form, but the championship is definitely still within his reach.
And one final thought from Dura Payton on Lando's attitude, saying his calm message after the Canada incident suggested he thinks the title is gone and he's accepting it.
I don't see it that way at all, actually. I think that was more about his honesty, combined with McLaren's team culture. They talk about accountability.
Taking responsibility immediately.
Yeah. They likely discussed that exact scenario, what happens if one driver makes a mistake and takes the other out. When it happened, Norris knew instantly it was 100% his fault. Owning it immediately was the right thing for the team dynamic.
So it wasn't giving up, it was processing and moving on.
Yeah. I think so. It shows maturity, in a way. To accept you messed up spectacularly, take the hit, and start the process of putting it behind you, that's actually quite positive, I think.
Okay, let's pivot and look ahead. The Austrian Grand Prix. Are McLaren the team to beat going in?
I think you'd have to say yes, generally. McLaren seems to be the benchmark on most circuits right now. And Austria, on paper, should suit them quite well.
Why is that?
Those long, flowing, quick corners, that tends to play to the McLaren's strengths. It doesn't really have the super tight, slow sections that sometimes expose the car's weaker points.
And the Red Bull Ring, it's been a good track for Lando historically, hasn't it? Some really standout drives there.
It has, yeah. He seems to like it, but... And here's the counterpoint.
Oh, is Austria a sprint weekend? I completely lose track.
Easy to do. No, surprisingly, it's not a sprint this year, so more practice time.
Okay, good. So the counterpoint for Norris.
Well, it's a deceptively tricky track. Despite the short lap, like 60 seconds, it really invites errors. There isn't really an easy corner.
Lots of elevation changes, blind crests, tricky curves.
Exactly. It's intense, very little rest. And those places where you need absolute precision, where you're pushing the limits, that's where Norris's recent struggles with the car's feel might just reappear quite emphatically.
So it'll be a really good test. More data on that suspension tweak from Canada, too.
Definitely. It will tell us a lot about whether they're getting on top of that front-end feedback issue, especially under pressure.
Okay, beyond McLaren, any dark horses we should keep an eye on in Austria?
Well, two, potentially. Mercedes and Ferrari.
Mercedes? Really? Hot track, long corners? Doesn't usually suit them, does it?
Normally, no. But that new rear suspension they brought to Canada seemed to give them fantastic control over tire temperatures, even when pushed hard. If it stays hot in Austria, which is forecast, they could be surprisingly competitive.
Interesting. And Ferrari?
They're expected to bring some upgrades, mainly around the rear end, internal suspension stuff. If that works, they could get back to being the really quick car we saw earlier in the season, up to maybe China.
So it could be quite a mix at the front again.
Potentially, yeah. It's always a fascinating weekend, Austria. It's just a brilliant, modern F1 track. Looks stunning, too.
And usually produces good racing, lots of overtaking spots.
It really does. The laps tick by so quickly, it gives the race a great rhythm. Always a good one for TV.
Right, so let's wrap up this deep dive on Lando Norris for 2025. What are the key takeaways?
I think the main thing is his challenges are real and multi-layered. It's the Q3 drop-off, it's how the car suits his specific style, it's some racecraft moments, and crucially, it's the huge pressure from a massively improved Oscar Piastri.
But crucially, it's not over.
Not by a long shot. It's too early to write him off. He has the raw speed, the car is clearly very quick. If he can iron out these issues, the championship is absolutely still winnable for him.
Understanding these dynamics hopefully gives you, our listeners, a much clearer perspective on what's really playing out.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with. You often learn the most about elite athletes, not when everything's going perfectly, but when they face adversity, when those internal and external pressures really ramp up.
And that's exactly what we're seeing with Lando Norris right now. His mental strength, his ability to adapt, is being tested in real time.
How he responds over these next few races, that's going to be fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive on F1 blogs. We hope this analysis gives you that extra layer of understanding.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Make sure you subscribe to F1 blogs to stay right up to date with everything F1. We'll keep bringing you the analysis and perspectives that matter. We'll catch you on the next one.